Now the problem was the only places I shopped was like the casino stores and things like that. And it's not easy to buy a Bible in Las Vegas in the casino stores. And so I went to several of them, and finally this one lady says, "You're not going to find a Bible here." And I said, "You know, I'm beginning to believe that." I said, "Where would you go if you wanted a Bible?" She said, "Go across the street." And she said, "There's a book rack, and on the book rack there's a Bible." Now my wife had been very careful to describe to me what Bibles look like. She says they're black, and it says Holy Bible on the side of them, or on the back of them. And I said, "Is it black?" I didn't want anybody to put anything over me, you know. I said, "Is it black?" She said, "Well, I don't think so." I said, "Well, then it can't be a Bible." And she said, "I think it's a Bible. Go on over there." So I went over to the drugstore, and sure enough, I asked the clerk, and she went over and she got this green book. It was a paperback, and she took it down, and it said New Testament, New English New Testament. And I said, "That's not a Bible." And she said, "Yeah, it's a Bible. It's half a Bible." And I said, "It's half a Bible?" I said, "What do you mean it's half a..." This thing was getting complicated, you know. I said, "What do you mean it's half a Bible?" And she said, "It's half a Bible." I said, "You selling it for half price?" And she said, "No, but take it, you'll like it." Well, I found out later you can't get saved reading that translation. And I told the guy, "Shh, God doesn't know that, because that's the one I read, and it worked for me, you know." Well, anyway, I got the book home, and I started reading it. You ever read that book? That's a weird book. It's all about Jewish people. I started reading. I read about 7 or 8 pages, and I went into my wife, and I said, "This is all about Jewish people." And she said, "Well, I know that." She said, "God's Jewish." I said, "Oh, come on, is he really?" You know. Now keep in mind, I didn't have any prejudice about Jews because I had worked with Jewish people all my life. I'd been in the entertainment industry, in the garment industry before that, and you know, and all through show business and record industry. Every place I worked with Jewish people. It wasn't any antagonism towards them being Jew. That was just news to me that God was a Jew. I didn't know, you know. And so we tried to read the book. Well, I started taking it with me to work. Now, when I went to work at night, we worked the midnight shift from midnight till 4, and we would do a show, and then we would have an intermission while another group did a show, and then we would go back. We were a lounge act. And so during the intermissions, I was taking my Bible, and I was going in and sitting down at the bar, and they had these little pin lights, you know, over the bar, and I was sitting there reading one night. And the bartender came over and said, "What you reading?" And I said, "The Bible." And he said, "You shouldn't read it here." And I said, "Why not? The light's good." And he says, "No," he says, "you shouldn't read it." Besides, he says, "That's not the real Bible anyway." And I slammed it down. I said, "I knew it." I said, "What's the real Bible like?" And he says, "Well, they're black." And I thought, all right, you know, this guy knows. He knows what it is. And I said, "And it says Holy Bible on it." And he says, "Yes." And I said, "Well, where do you get them?" He says, "Well, you buy them at the Bible bookstore, dummy." I said, "The Bible bookstore?" And he said, "Yeah." He says, "There's one down the street." And so I went right into the lobby and looked up in the yellow pages, and sure enough, right down the street there was a Bible bookstore. So I got in my car and drove down there, and it was closed. They're missing a lot of business closed. You know, the sinners are out at that time of night. And so I went back to him and I said, they're closed. He said, "Well," he says, "you can get it in the morning." And he wrote a note down. He said, "Just give him this note and you'll get the real, true Bible." And so the next morning, I waited down there. I got off the shift at 4 o'clock, went down there and parked and waited. And about 8:30, this woman came and opened the door, and I followed her in. She was a nice lady. And I said, "I want to buy a Bible." And she says, "Oh, good." And then I found out there's all kinds of Bibles, you know, lots of Bibles. You've got big Bibles and little Bibles. And she said, "What kind of Bible you want?" I said, "I don't know." And I pulled this note out and I handed it to her. And on it said, "The King James Virgin." You know. She laughed too. Anyway, the next thing I know, about 10 minutes later, I'm walking out the door, and I'm the proud owner of a Bible. It's got Moroccan leather, you know, and it's got little finger tabs, you know, and it's got a concordance in the back, and it was wonderful. And so I took it home, and I sat down to read it. I was so excited. Now, about 10 o'clock in the morning, I sat down to read it, and I can't understand a thing. Have you ever tried to read that book? that's the weirdest book. I opened up to Ezekiel, you know. That's a weird dude, man, that Ezekiel. Well, anyway, I was very disappointed. So I'm talking to my wife about it, and I'm saying, look, this book's hard to read. And she said, I know, it's really difficult to understand. That's why people read it over and over again, you know. I mean, they got to read it more than once? And she said, yeah. And I said, you know, God is hard to get connected with. It's hard to find God, you know. Well, over the next few weeks and months, we continued the process daily of reading the Bible. We found after a week or two that somebody recommended a series of books for children on the Bible. We found out we could buy them at the same bookstore. We went and got them, and we would read these little children's books, and then we would read the Bible. And that was working out pretty good. And after about 3 months, we decided to leave Las Vegas and go back home. We hadn't been home more than a week or so when my friend Dick came over to see me. He began sharing with us, and now we had someone that was a living witness. And over the next few weeks, he began talking to us about Jesus and what Jesus could do for us. Well, one of the weirdest things happened was they invited us to church. You ever been to church? Come on, own up. You ever been to church? Well, one morning at 7 o'clock, now keep in mind, I didn't get home normally until about 2 o'clock. So 7 o'clock, my wife's pushing me and saying, we're going to church. Get up, we're going to church. I'm saying, hot dog, you know, I don't want to go to church. Why do they have it so early in the morning? She said, well, we got to drive clear up to Yorba Linda, because that's where God was, in Yorba Linda, at Dick and Lynn's church. And so we got dressed and we got in the car, you know, and it took us a long time. We couldn't find the kids' shoes, and we got in the car, and by then I was mad, and we got in a bit, you know, argument, and we found out later it was the tradition that you're supposed to argue all the way to church. But we didn't know it, you know. We were already into the thing, and we argued all the way up there, and we finally get there, and it's a little old building, you know. I remember I drove up in front of it, and I thought, this place is hurting, you know. Old and everything. And they got one of these marquees out in front, you know, with what's on for the day. And I'm looking at that, and I thought, that doesn't look interesting. You know, I didn't even know what it was talking about. The next thing I know, we're out of the car, and we're walking up these steps, and I suddenly realized that I'm the only one there smoking. And I thought, hey, this is 1963. Don't you guys know how, you know? So I started looking for an ashtray. You ever look for an ashtray in one of those places? I couldn't find one for anything, you know. I finally put it out on the ground. And some guy with a flower looked at it. Then another weird thing happened. I noticed that everybody talked real loud. Hi, how are ya? They said, you know. And you can put your child over here, and I'm not going to put my child over there. You know, I don't know what was going on. This is the weirdest thing I had ever been to. And, I mean, I've been in and out of bars for years, and nobody had ever treated me this way. And so I'm walking real close to my wife because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I didn't know what was next. And we walk in through this building, and this guy handed us a menu. And I'm looking at it, and, you know, it doesn't make any sense to me at all, you know. And we're walking along, and my kids, Chris was on one hand, and Tim's on the other hand, and Carol's got Sean under her arm, and we'd put Stephanie in this thing. They said they'd give her back later on, but we weren't sure. And we're walking through there, and one of the kids says, "Hey, Daddy, what's that?" I said, "Hell, I don't know." And my wife turned around and said, "Shh, don't cuss." And I said, "I'm not cussing. I'll show you cussing." That's all we were good at in those days, was fighting. And so we finally get seated, and they made us sit right down in the front row. Did they ever do that to you? All the back seats were full, and we had to... And we're sitting there, and we got this, you know, we're looking at this menu, and we don't know what's going to happen. And the next thing I know, these three guys walk in, and they're real nice-looking guys. They all got suits on, and they come in and they sit down, and one guy sort of bounces up and comes up to a thing that looks sort of like this, and he says, "Good morning." And I thought, well, that's a nice way to open the show, you know, real friendly. And he said, "Let us pray. Our Father and our God." I thought, what's that? So I turned to my friend Dick and I said, "What's the matter with his voice?" He said, "I don't know, they all sound like that." He says, "I think they get it at seminary." And this guy, and he finished praying, I guess, and then he sat down, and another guy came up and said he was going to give the ministry of the Word. And so they began reading the Bible. Now, keep in mind, all these weeks we had been reading the King James Bible, but we'd never read it out loud. We didn't know what it sounded like. And the guy started speaking, and I thought, oh no, he's got a speech impediment. He lisps. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Listen to that poor guy." She said, "Oh, I know. And she said, "Well, there's no better place to hire the handicapped than the church." And I thought, this place is weird. And then they started singing these songs. You ever heard a congregational song? We had a guy standing right behind us. He wasn't that close to any note on the page. You know? I mean, not that close. And I thought any minute those guys with the flowers, they're going to get rid of this dude. He's not going to last long here. And then the next thing, you've never been to church. The next thing that happened, this is really weird. The next thing that happened on the thing, it said that the choir was going to minister. And when the choir stood up to sing and they hit the first note, I said, "This is no choir. This is a pickup group. Surely they couldn't have rehearsed and sound that bad." It was awful. I listened to it. Now, it's an interesting thing. When a speaker's speaking or a choir is singing and people are listening to them, there's two jobs going on at the same time. I found out that I finished my job a lot sooner than they finished their job. I was through before they were. In any case, they sang for a while, and then this gal sang a solo. Anyway, this gal sang a solo. This is the kind of gal that comes up and introduces her song about, that God's given me this voice and I'm going to give it back to Him. And God goes, "No." She had a vibrato that went at least 5 notes. She was in any of 3 keys at any time that you wanted to be there. Now, these were lovely people, please understand that, but this was my impression that first day. The next thing I know, this guy's preaching, and I don't know what he's talking about. And I'm listening, and I'm counting the tiles, and my kids are squirming, and they want to go, and they're talking to me, and they have to go to the bathroom, and they can't go to the bathroom because of the guys with the flowers. And it's going on and 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 on. And I'm thinking, this is really bad news. I got to get out of here. First of all, I hadn't gone 40 minutes without smoking in years. I was hurting, my nose was draining, Oh, it was awful. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, this has got to stop. This has got to stop. And all of a sudden, I knew it was going to stop. Because I could sense the momentum picking up. When the show's going to close, they rally for this big finish. And the guy was saying something to the effect that if anybody's been moved by what they've just heard, that they were supposed to come forward to this altar. And I'm looking for the altar, and I can't see any altar, because I've seen the movies, where they put the maiden on the thing, and they didn't have anything like that. So I turned to my friend, I said, "Where's the altar? They forgot the altar, they blew it, they forgot." No, he says, "That's that banister thing that goes right around there, and like that, around the stairs and everything. That's the altar." I said, "That can't be the altar, they can't get any maiden on that altar, He says, "No, that's the altar. That's what they use for the altar, John. That's the altar, all right." Okay, Dick, but that's the altar.